Fresh meat.
The first scene is from my first feature, a film called Cohen and Tate with Roy Scheider, which is a crime film about two hitmen who kidnap a little boy. And the movie opens in a farmhouse where the little boy and his mother and father are under FBI Federal Witness Relocation Program protection. And in the scene, they come to realize that something's coming for them. And what I love about this scene is its slow build of tension. There's something out there, we don't see what it is, but you know, bit by bit, we realize that there are people, there's something coming for them. And the whole scene was somewhat tricky to shoot because I shot it all in a practical farmhouse outside of Texas. And there was really no way to shoot the scene in masters. It had to be shot in pieces, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. And the camera work involved a lot of short, quick dolly moves to create this kind of visual sense of building tension. And the whole objective of the scene was really to introduce these two hitmen who become the main characters of the story, one played by Roy Scheider, one played by Adam Baldwin. And to keep them off screen for as long as possible, and to build up the tension with this family inside and one FBI agent kind of hunkering down in the house. The scene builds with, you know, around a table with increasingly tightening coverage. The whole sequence was also designed to be done at twilight, so that this house attack where the family is assassinated by the hitmen and the little boy's kidnapped takes place in a slowly gathering dusk. So we built our whole lighting design for this sequence on kind of gradually darkening lighting and the hues of dusk becoming more and more kind of deep and menacing, until finally by the end of it, when the boy walks in, it's all black. When the two hitmen finally do make their appearance, when they break into the house and take down their victims, both characters are introduced, their character by the character of each of these two men, by the way they kill. Cohen, who's an old pro, takes down his victim with one shot. Tate, a bloodthirsty psychopath, empties an entire shotgun on the FBI agent to kill him. A stunt we did with the stuntman, Andy Gill, jumping through a window and then us firing an air cannon full of blood and candy glass and all sorts of matter after him, so it's pretty grisly. But that first moment we have, that first introduction we have, pretty much tells you who their characters are and how it's going to develop through the course of the story. A scene I very much, there were two influences on this scene. One was actually an influence on the entire script, which was a Ernest Hemingway short story called The Killers, which was a very spare, almost banal story about two hitmen waiting in a diner for their victims. And all they're doing is talking about food. They're talking about peas and carrots, and they have this very blank kind of conversation, but it's laden with this menace of knowing why they're there. And Cohen and Tate, the script, was very much like that. It was a script of 1 and 2 word lines of dialogue. I mean, even the action description was 1 and 2 words often. The other scene that was a big influence on the opening of Cohen and Tate, the scene you're watching, was The Searchers. You know, I mean, even when I was starting out, I always had kind of classical tastes, and there's a wonderful scene, a classic scene in The Searchers, where a family of homesteaders are surrounded. They realize their house is surrounded by Indians, and what's tremendous about the tension in the scene is that you almost never see an Indian. You just see birds flying in the air. You see everything from their point of view in the house as they're boarding it up, and by keeping the Indians off screen, such a huge sense of apprehension and anticipation is built. So that was very much what I was going for in the opening farmhouse sequence. an anticipation about these killers based on the fact we don't see them. We just have a sense of them. And I think that one of the reasons this is one of my favorite scenes is I love when you don't show it. Like, it's not how you show it, it's how you don't show it. When it's very easy to throw a lot of blood around in an action scene and make it dramatic, but to keep things off screen and to build tension and suspense by anticipation with the audience, I think that it is ultimately much more involving for the audience and more rewarding. And a few of my favorite scenes in this piece are scenes that involved a great deal of that. My favorite action horror set piece I ever directed was in my second film, Body Parts, for Paramount. And the film involved a man who loses his arm in a freeway car wreck and receives a transplanted arm of a killer. And the scene that set the whole thing up was this massive set piece where he's driving to work. And when he stops behind a car that's lost its wheel ahead, right when he thinks he's okay, a truck behind him can't brake in time and hits the back of his truck, knocks him through the windshield, and his arm is torn off at the shoulder. And this sequence sets the whole story in motion. And we filmed in Toronto in the wintertime, and I was able to find a section of freeway that was under construction. So we were able to close this off and stage the film, stage this whole sequence very realistically through some very high-level stunt work and auto stunt work. And it was filmed in segments over 2.5 days. And the first section following the star Jeff Fahey on the phone, on his cell phone driving in his car. He filmed off an insert car with 5 cameras. And in the first stunt gag, the car ahead he sees through the windshield is starting to lose its rear wheel. So I put a camera on the front of that car with the special effects rig that would blow the wheel off, shooting backwards past the wheel to Jeff's car, so that when the wheel finally did blow off and we had a spark effect as well, the entire frame tilted sideways, and as the car lost its wheel and began to skid. So it really put the audience in the driver's seat. And for the final section of this sequence, when the truck hits Jeff Fahey's car and he goes through the windshield, the last part of the stunt involved the truck pushing his car into the back of a car ahead of him that we bolted down on the freeway. And the stuntman, with an effect where his arm was hanging off, a special effect, was perched on the hood of the car, and the truck actually pushed the car very slowly into the car ahead. But in this on this day we did it, the front car, we hit it just a little bit too hard, and the front car flipped and picked the stuntman up and threw him about 50 feet through the flipping car. And it was a stunt that went a little bit wrong, not due to any lack of safety procedures on our part. We rehearsed it very carefully. We shot it, but the stunt did go a little bit wrong, and the stuntman was not harmed. He got up and walked away. But we had this, after staging the sequence, I had 9 cameras covering it, and after it was over, the first thing I did was, yelled to the stuntman, "Are you okay?" And he said, yeah, I'm fine." He got up and walked away. And then, of course, I turned to all the camera operators and said, "Did you get it?" Because, we'd seen one of the, we just witnessed probably one of the best stunts any of us had ever seen. And one by one, all the camera operators shook their head, because nobody was expecting the front car to flip, and nobody was expecting the stuntman to go flying. So he went out of frame. So virtually, of the 9 cameras we had on the sequence, seven of the operators didn't get it. But fortunately, I had 3 other cameras. One of them looked shooting through the windshield of the truck that was pushing the car. One of them inside the car itself, and then a high angle shot where on a high platform where I was. And we stayed up all night and waited for dailies, and those 3 cameras actually caught the stunt and caught the action with the stuntman flying over the top of the car. They were right inside the accident, so they were actually the best shots we had. So when you watch the scene in the film, it's just one of the most it's a person, it's not a dummy, and it's one of the most dangerous looking, effective, dramatic stunt wreck scene, car wreck scenes I've certainly ever seen. And it definitely sold the initial trauma that happens to the hero before he gets his arm transplanted. The next scene, that's another one of my favorite scenes, is from my werewolf movie Bad Moon. And the story of Bad Moon was about a German shepherd that lived with a single mother and her son. And one day the uncle moves in, and the dog realizes that the uncle's a werewolf. So the whole movie is really a extended mano a mano between this dog trying to protect his family from this uncle who really doesn't mean any harm to the family at first. But he has this condition, he turns into a werewolf. And the whole movie builds up ultimately to a final showdown between the dog and the werewolf. So the film had qualities of a Western in that it was really a series of showdowns between the dog and the uncle that ultimately led to the final, fight to the death showdown at the end. And the scene that you're watching is a scene where the dog goes out and stakes out the uncle's airstream, where the uncle is staying while he's staying with the family. He's staying in his own trailer in the backyard. And the dog is basically standing sentry and standing watch to stop the uncle from hurting the family. And the uncle in this scene is trying to actually get out of the airstream so he can go and handcuff himself to a tree because it's twilight, it's dusk, and it's a full moon that night. So the tension of this whole scene is really based on this kind of essential misunderstanding with the dog trying to stand in the way of the uncle, but the uncle desperately having to get past the dog to get to be able to handcuff and restrain himself to a tree when he turns into a werewolf that night. And what I love about the scene is that it's essentially is like a Western. It's staged like a showdown, like a gunfight. It's filmed in a lot of close-ups, a lot of over-the-shoulders. All about the build-up between the dog and the uncle. And this confrontation that really plays out without dialogue, which is another one of the things I really love about it. I love scenes in movies where the drama plays out without any lines of dialogue, where it's all in the looks, it's in the glances, it's in the gestures. And the drama in this scene is really primal. It's really animal. And that a lot has to do with the star Michael Pare and the way he engaged with this dog that we had. Now, there's an old cliche the way they say that the things that you never want to work with are kids and animals. I have not found that to be true. I find that working with dogs is simply another production challenge, and that making movies for me is really all about kind of interesting, creative production challenges to create this illusion of reality. And the dog was, in this one, getting a performance out of the dog, making his character, really kind of carry the movie, was one of the challenges of the picture. In the scene you're watching, we actually use two dogs. The over the shoulders, where you're framed over, we frame over the dog to the trailer, was an older dog, a female named Echo, and basically she was very good for just sitting still. And we could film for hours, filming over her shoulder, having her lie down, or what have you. The other dog, our lead dog, our hero dog, was named Primo, and he took 6 months to cast. It was very, very hard to find the right dog who had the right look on camera, who had that primal, protective, heroic German Shepherd thing, and Primo absolutely did. But he was also a puppy. He was about 6 months old, even though he was a very big dog when we filmed this. So one of the things that really comes across in the movie is this dog's incredible focus. You know, the way he bonds, the way he looks, those strong protective looks. Well, the fact was Primo had those looks for about 3 seconds, and then he would go and look and scratch and this, that, and the other. So for every shot that we have here of the dog that lasts maybe a few seconds, I rolled about a full magazine of film to get, with the trainer off camera trying to get the looks and stuff. And we would shoot 10 minutes. We'd roll 10 minutes and the dog would be scratching and yawning and looking this way and that way. And then he would nail it. He would lock and he would bond. And we get that marvelous, you know, primal look that he has in the movie. And then, you know, those were the pieces we used. So we built the performance as one does often, you know, in the cutting room. One of the other things I like in this scene is there's a number of uses of subliminal suggestion. One of them is the airstream itself, which resembles a silver bullet. But even more so, it's actually the shot of the handcuffs. So in one of the shots over the uncle, there's two of them where he's holding handcuffs in his hand, which he's going to use later to handcuff himself to the tree. But you know, we frame over those handcuffs to the dog, and there's a subliminal sense. I don't know that the audience consciously picks it up, but I think they feel it, of these two. This dog and this man, this werewolf, their fates are locked. They're handcuffed together. And I love doing that. I love using certain subliminal suggestions to create something that people adds to the story, whether the people watching it are conscious of it or not. Another thing we did in this scene was, again, it was another scene that took place over a transition to twilight, you know, because the uncle's trying to get out of the airstream and to restrain himself before night falls and the moon rises. So we use filtration and lighting to create a sense of gradual darkness over the scene, which I think works well. Michael Pare is wonderful in it. You know, I love his. You know, he has a real animal magnetism as an actor, and he really was very, very engaged with his dog, and to build the relationship between the two of them. And I just love the scene Slow Burn. It's very long. It's all about the potential of things about to happen, and there's a real elegance to it. So this is another one of my favorite scenes. The last scene in this list of my favorite scenes is from my film 100 Feet, and it's the main title credits in the opening. And the film is a ghost thriller about a woman who is under house arrest for the self-defense murder of her husband, a police officer. And she's fitted, while she's under house arrest, with a police ankle bracelet that only allows her to go 100 feet. And if she ventures past that point, it alerts the police and she goes back to jail. And she's sentenced to serve this time in the Brooklyn brownstone that they lived. And in the house happens to be his very vengeful ghost, who commences a campaign of psychological and physical terror to get revenge on her. And it's again a mano a mano story about how this woman, you know, confronts the ghost and ultimately overcomes the ghost of her husband. And the reason that I like the opening of this movie so much, the very beginning of it, is because I think that the first 10 minutes of a movie, like the first 10 pages of a screenplay or the first chapter of a novel, are the most important part of the story. It's the part where you seal the deal with the audience, where you grab their attention, where you involve them. It's essential to do that in those first 10 minutes. And 100 Feet posed a certain challenge because it was a ghost film and it was a horror film, yet the movie couldn't begin with the standard jump scare or horror gore sequence that horror films so often do, that my movie Bad Moon did. We couldn't do that to get your attention, because to do that would have completely destroyed the pace of the film, because the film has a very slow build of dread and suspense. So it needed a different kind of opening, but still an opening that really grabbed you from the beginning. So instead of hitting the audience in the face, I decided to lead them around by the nose. And so the opening of the movie is really about the mystery of who this woman is when we first meet her, who her character is. And it's revealed over that opening 10 minutes, so by the end of the 10 minutes, you know really everything about her and why she's there. But it begins, it's much more subtle. It begins with this juxtaposition of images. We open on a traveling shot of a car going past the Calvary Cemetery in Brooklyn, in Long Island, this sprawling cemetery outside of New York. And then we see this beautiful woman, Famke Janssen, who plays the main character, Marnie Watson. Her face looking through the windshield of a car. And we see the reflections on the windshield. Then we hear police radio. Then we see in the front seat that the driver is a detective or a police officer. And already we have the graveyard, we have the woman, we have this police officer. We see them driving on the Brooklyn Queens Expressway going through Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Where are they going? And then we hear this clink of handcuffs, and she raises her hands, and we see she's handcuffed. So now we know she's a prisoner. And we begin to realize she's being, taken from prison, or maybe she's being taken to prison. We don't really know. But a sense of mystery is built up about this character. And then they pull up in front of the brownstone, and she's the detective, played by Bobby Cannavale, takes her out and takes her into the house. And here we have actually one of my favorite shots I've had the chance to do, which was a Technicrane shot that shows the car pulling up, them getting out, and her about to go into the building. And the Technicrane is a long extension crane, mechanical extension crane, and it has a hothead on it, which is basically a remote pivot that allows the camera to move in 180 degrees. And so it begins in a very high angle shot of the car pulling up, and then it drops down as they get out of the car, and then goes down, framing her in a medium shot, and then drops way below behind her as she walks and looks at the brownstone, and we reveal the brownstone, and she's standing in front of it with it looming over her like the Mount Everest of haunted houses, where during the story she will face and fight her internal and external ghosts both. And it was a very elegant shot, and it was a wonderful tool to be able to use to achieve that. Once they go into the house, the film was shot in New York City, in Brooklyn for the exteriors, and we shot all of the interiors of this brownstone, where most of the movie takes place, virtually all of it takes place, on a 3-story set that we built in Budapest, Hungary. And the set, we had to shoot it on a set because we needed to be able to fly the walls, fly the ceilings, be able to really have almost unlimited opportunities for camera positioning. particularly in a suspense film and a thriller, so we could use all kind of lenses, all different focal lengths, and really have unrestricted ability to do angles. The way that part of the way the set was tied into the exterior location, and you see it here, is were shots through the window from the inside of the house to the outside street, and those were all in the script, and they were all shot listed. So those we filmed in New York on the location, and then we filmed the rest of the film on the set. So once they come in, we learn that the dialogue really begins in the scene, and we begin to find out more about her. We find out that she's there because she killed her husband. We find out that her husband was a detective's partner, and we then find out, still in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we find out about the nature of this ankle bracelet, this electronic ankle bracelet that will only allow her to go 100 feet. How it works. And the role of the technician is played by my good friend John Fallon, Arrow in the Head, who plays the tech. I thought actually he would be perfect casting because John is so he's young, and he's an absolute master of all things cyber and technical and internet.
You're free to move anywhere within a 100-foot radius. If you go past a 100-foot perimeter, an alarm activates. If the alarm continues for more than 3 minutes, the signal will automatically be sent, and the cops will be dispatched to the scene immediately.
That would be me.
And so he plays the character Jimmy, who comes in and demonstrates the ankle bracelet for Marnie, and also for us, the audience. Puts it on her ankle and then goes and turns on the unit and sets it up upstairs. And what I love about John's performance in this is he brings his natural sense of humor and personality to it, and he brings his character that has a welcome levity in this kind of very tense early part of the movie, particularly between these two hard-nosed characters of Famke Janssen's Marnie and Bobby Cannavale's Detective Shanks, and gives a really nice balance to the scene. And while all this action's going on, we're doing something else too. I'm establishing the geography of the house, because when you have a movie that's all set in a house or in one location, it's important that the audience not feel confused about where they are. So very deliberately and quietly, we're going from room to room, we're going up the stairs, we're giving the audience a sense of comfort, as Marnie does, as Famke's character does, about the house that she lives in, so you know what is where and where you are. Which kind of gets back to, again, what I think is so important always in those first 10 minutes of a movie, the first 10 pages of a script. It's that suspense, particularly in a suspense story, because suspense requires clarity. The most important thing, I believe, in the opening of a story is that the audience knows where they are, that they have a sense of what the story is, who the characters are, what the setup is, because then they'll go with you. But they have to find their feet first. Otherwise, they feel lost, and they're not really ready to kind of surrender to the story. So by the end of this first 10 minutes of this movie, of the movie that you're watching right now, you know the setup. You know that this woman's under house arrest. You know why she's under house arrest. You haven't met the ghost yet, but you will soon enough. And everything is done, all this exposition's done, I think, in a very kind of subtle, organic way. And the reason I like this scene so much is just as an example of it was a very good example of how to set up a character and a story in a way that was, kind of led you around by the nose. It had a sense of mystery to it. It makes you intrigued. It pulls the audience into the story without using the usual horror movie tricks of blood and gore or some big shock opening. And I guess lastly, one of the reasons that I love this scene, this seen so much is all the location filming in New York. I mean, I love filming on location. I think that real life locations add an authenticity and reality to a movie that really helps, particularly in a genre film, the audiences to suspend their disbelief. And you know, the whole trip that she takes that we filmed on the BQE on an insert car towing the car with Famke, with police motors keeping traffic back. That whole path from Long Island through Williamsburg into Brooklyn Heights, past the Brooklyn Bridge, really set the scene, set the atmosphere, set this, you know, this whole urban environment. And the brownstone itself, you know, has a wonderful quality of kind of an 1800s ghost story, because the brownstones in Brooklyn they're very old buildings. So we were able to keep this sense of modern urban reality to the ghost story, but still echo back to these kind of Henry James kind of turn of the screw sort of period where there were so many wonderful ghost stories written. And it gave me a chance to film in New York, where I'm from. And in fact, I went to high school very, very near where we shot all the scenes in the brownstone. So the film had a sentimental appeal too. But it definitely, between of the 4 scenes you've seen, those are probably my 4 favorite. I'm not saying they're the best scenes in all of my films, but they're the ones that for various reasons I like the best. And, you know, thank you for, you know, tuning in and watching this. If you haven't seen any of these films, they're all on Blu-ray and DVD, and you know, I hope you have a chance to see Cohen and Tate and Body Parts and Bad Moon and 100 Feet. There's other scenes in them I like too. Thanks.